When you spiritually bypass real life situations and make them about God, there's really no argument against it. Well, God told me, well, God told me, well, God told me. So I tell people, like, look, don't judge whether something comes from God simply based on what the person told you. Like, look at the fruit of that. Don't just look at the, well, it happened at church, so it must be God. What's the fruit of that thing? If my pastor said it, so it must be God. What's the fruit of that thing? When you apply what they said, what fruit did it bear in your life? Did you feel more at peace? Did you feel more connected to yourself and the world around you? Like, consider all of those things, because I believe that is divinity, right? I believe the inner peace that you feel is the presence of the divine, not just the acceptance of a community or a pastor that tells you they're the voice of God.
Today, we are talking about religion and sexuality. And to have this difficult, at times, conversation, we have Kristian Smith, the Kristian Smith, the let's deconstruct some harmful theology Kristian Smith. Kristian Smith has been deconstructing harmful theology and building a beloved community one cigar at a time through his podcast, Holy Smokes, where he is the host and heretic, and through the Faith Community, a virtual pro-Black, pro-woman, pro-LGBT, and anti-foolishness church, where he is the founder and pastor. So before we get like in it, I like to start off with just doing a feelings check-in. Any of my clients would know that that's how I like to start, but it gives me an idea of where your head's already at, even at the start of this conversation.
So in our Patreon, we do Mood Mondays, and every Monday we ask people how they feeling, and we show them different mood charts. So I need to get this, and I'm gonna shout you out and tell people how to find you, because this is dope.
Thank you very much.
I am optimistic and unbothered.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah. Some great opportunities have presented themselves this week, so I'm optimistic about that. And then, as my platform is very polarizing, so people hate me with the same intensity that other people love me. So I am
I don't know.
optimistic
Is that
about
true? Can people hate you if they don't know you? They
they.
don't even have. They don't even have the range.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. They treat me with hatred. You see what I'm saying? They project their internal self-loathing and insecurity onto me. So I was just like simplifying that and saying they hate me.
Word. And I think I'm at a space, especially because I mean this here is 2025. I am in a space now where I'm just like, I'm not gonna own that you hate me. You don't know me well enough. You don't have the range to hate me.
Hmm.
What you can hate is the thing I said. What you can dislike is the thing I did. What you can dislike is the way that what I said made you uncomfortable. And that's not a me thing, that's a you thing all day, every day. And I want us to get into the habit of naming it, of pointing it out, because, ooh, there's no nice way to say this. I think that the people are devolving. They are crashing out on the internet in a very public way. Every time somebody has an opinion that is different from theirs, every time that somebody says something, I'm like, and not harmful opinions, but someone that's just like, hey, think about this thing. I just want to give you something to think about. People are so upset.
It's threatening.
Because it's like, what is it about your status quo that feels so enjoyable that opening your eyes to another possibility feels so threatening? Because if your religion, this is me, I'm gonna take it there. If your religion is as strong as you say it is, then you should be able to withstand somebody asking a question. You should be able to sit in the question and know that your faith will not be shook. And I guess I find myself in a space of just wondering, like, how has religion historically been influencing our societal views, not just on sex and sexuality, but even beyond that? And what role is it still playing now?
Yeah, you said a moment ago, like, if your religion is so enjoyable, and I just really don't believe people are enjoying themselves. The religion is fear-based. You can't really enjoy yourself in a fear-based religion. Like, you can find little pockets of enjoyment, but if it's rooted in fear of punishment and condemnation, then you're always walking on eggshells. I remember early on in my ministry, just, helping people walk through, you know, rethinking, reimagining their theology, and really honing in on this concept of sin and how much it is like all encompassing in fundamentalist Christianity, and how we were trying to help people unpack and unlearn what fundamentalism taught them about sin. And I remember I was working with somebody through this process, and it started to kind of stick, like, oh, maybe it is okay to rethink some of this stuff. But like they said, as they were going through that process, so if this stuff isn't a sin, what have we been doing all of this for?
Ooh,
You know what I'm saying? Like,
that is a question.
I built my whole life around this concept, and I made all of these sacrifices, and I suffered in ways I didn't need to suffer, and I accepted abuse I didn't need to accept, and I stayed silent when I should have opened my mouth. So like, what have I been doing all of this for? People not really enjoying it. They are caught up in the false sense of security they have by following the rules, because they were told if they follow the rules, they'll get their reward.
But doesn't that make it transactional?
Absolutely.
Like, if you do X, then you get Y. And I'm just like, well, why do you even know what the thing is you're asking for? And why do you want it so badly that you're willing to suffer in the here and now in order to get this nebulous maybe thing that nobody can confirm on the back end? Now, for context, I was raised Christian. I went to a Nigerian Christian church
Oh,
for for many, many years before we went to a white American Baptist church.
okay.
I say that it's white because despite the fact that it seemed diverse at the time, it took a friend pointing it out, like on one of those times where you just invite somebody to church with you, to point out, like, these people are heavily, heavily Republican.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't see it until they were like, a vote for Obama is a vote for the devil. And I was just like, is it?
Yeah.
Which, what, how?
Yeah.
I was so confused. But for me, that's part of my exodus from church story.
Yeah. A lot of people have been through that experience. Like, the response to Obama, and then a lot of people left white churches in 2016 with the first Trump election, because a lot of people in my community who are LGBTQ plus, a lot of people went through this period where they were too queer for the black church, and they went to a white church and realized they were too black for the white church.
Yeah. So really, you have no space.
Yeah, so really didn't have a space, which was, part of the motivation, the inspiration to start the faith community. Because I was like, black people need a place to land when they're seeking, when they're searching, and when they need a place to safely process what it is that they're going through without fear of condemnation, with people who are on a similar journey and will walk with them and not dictate to them where they need to land.
I love what you just said there, because what you said is very inclusive of all Black people. And often, what I hear when someone says this is for Black people is that it's for Black people who are not LGBTQIA.
Hmm.
So that it's not for me. It's not. It's not for some of my best buds who we express our sexuality in a different space. That it is not for us.
Right. Right.
So how did you get here? Like, how did you come by wanting or even desiring to sort of deconstruct harmful theology? Like, what did you see? How did you feel?
So,
What was the thing that said, I got to share this?
it starts with my upbringing. I'm a fifth generation Baptist preacher. My father was a disruptor in his own context.
Okay.
So, I was raised in California, born in Oakland, moved to San Diego when I was 10. And my dad back in the 80s was licensing and ordaining women to preach, which was unheard of at that time. He actually got put out of the state convention for doing it. And then they eventually asked him to come back because they realized they made a mistake. So I grew up in a space where disruption was the norm. Like women in ministry was nothing new to me. Women in leadership was nothing new to me. So I already had that leg up just in my upbringing. Yet still had a number of theological blind spots, and I had gaping holes in my theology that I didn't know about. So I acknowledged the call to preach when I think how old was I? I was in my 20s, I think 22. I gotta go back and take a look. And I think it was 22. And my dad told me when I acknowledged my call to preach, he said, son, a call to preach is a call to prepare. So whatever you do, don't ever get up unprepared. Go to school, get educated, learn theology so you can be prepared as a preacher. So I was like, all right, bet. So I went to seminary and decided to go to Mercer University, McAfee School of Theology, because I wanted to go to a seminary that had like some more diverse opinions. Because I did black church my whole life. So I was like, let me get in a space with some different people and see what they in there talking about. And seminary is where everything shifted for me, because I was raised to be a critical thinker, but I wasn't given permission to use my critical thought in regards to my theology. Seminary gave me permission to use my critical thought as it pertains to my theology, and it equipped me with the tools for my inquisition.
That's wild, because sometimes I feel like church does not give people permission to have critical thought, to have critical feeling. It says this is the way you're supposed to feel about the thing I just said. This is the thing you're supposed to do with it. And it feels off that seminary would teach you one, but then preachers get up and teach us number two.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's a gap between the academy and the church. For example, being in seminary, we would sit around and have these roundtable discussions about all types of theological concepts. We would talk about different aspects of the Bible, different stories, different perspectives on these stories. And we just be throwing around all these different wild ideas. And we would be like, wow, never thought about it this way. This is so eye-opening. And inevitably, in every conversation, at least one of my classmates would say, you can't say that in the pulpit though, right?
But
Every
why?
time. Because it doesn't fit within the system, right? So if you do say it, you put your livelihood in jeopardy. And I am a living witness. One of my professors, who's now a member of my church, told us, like, in advance, I'm going to apologize in advance because we're probably going to educate some of you out of a job. So when preachers, and like all they know is preaching in church, when they consider how they're going to make a living, they consider what they're going to say to the people. And I'm not saying that that's right. I'm just saying making the right decision requires a hell of a lot of courage, because what are you going to do when the people reject you for telling them the truth? Because the people will reject you for telling them the truth. I am a living witness. That's how my ministry came to be. I was rejected by the church for telling the truth. So it's
So then
risky.
it is a fight between the desire of the calling and the desire of capitalism.
Absolutely. Because we got to live.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, word.
yeah,
And I think for me, the thing that it brings back into very sharp focus is that everybody has an agenda. Everybody has a reason for what they're doing, when they're doing, how they're doing it. And if we are uncritical in the thing that we are consuming, knowing what we're consuming and who's the one feeding it to us, we are not doing our jobs as the people who are taking in the thing, because we are so busy we just want the thing and we want it the way that we've always seen it, as opposed to the sort of the pulling apart and the deconstructing, which sort of gets me into a space of wondering about even the church's definition of desire, and why is desire for pleasure Why is desire for a life well lived? Why is desire sexually pathologized, especially in Black people within religious contexts?
It's competition. You know, yes.
Sorry, we competing with God. We're not one band, one sound.
No.
How are we not one band, one sound? Because
Fun,
as my friend would say, if God made my clitoris.
yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I'm just talking about fundamentalist theology.
That's wild.
Fundamentalist theology is rooted in control.
Well,
And if you're sexually liberated, how am I going to control you? If you're able to engage your desires without any obstructions, how am I going to control how you move? So like it's competition. So we don't realize a lot of times because we're born into it just how much our religion is rooted in control.
yeah. I mean, I've seen the power. I mean, I've seen some quite big BS, but I find that like when you say it like that, like it's about control. I think about the ways that I have wrested control back from these entities, and
And then you become a rebel.
right, a little bit of a story. My parents wanted to leave the Nigerian church that we were a part of when I was younger, except that apparently some people were saying some things that if you leave this church, you'll be cursed.
Yeah.
Right. So like you leave
Control.
this church, you're going to be cursed. And, like African Nigerian people don't play with juju. So when someone said it, it makes it harder to want to leave. And so many people apparently were staying because of this thing that they heard. And then my parents decided that we were going to go. And so we left. And all those people, all those church leaders showed up at our house one day after their church service to be like, now, why would you go? Why would you do this to your girls? Because, I mean, me and my 3 younger sisters, it's just like, why would you do this to them? This is where they know family. This is where they know love. And I was just like, excuse me, I can speak for myself. Leave me out of your argument. Because what I have known at your church is not whatever you think you've sold. Like, please stop.
Yeah.
And I spoke about why we were leaving from my perspective and that I respected my parents' decision for us to move. I think that they were really just wanting the choir master and the lead singer to stay there.
Of course. Yeah.
And I'm just like, so it's a benefit to you, but it wasn't a benefit to us. And for me, like the Republican church thing is what sort of got me out. And I've never felt closer to God than when I left the church.
Yeah. And that was the fear that they would lose control. The reason they told you that you would be cursed if you left is to control your movements. And what happens is it's so insidious because a lot of times people will still leave, but the curse will linger. And all of us experience hardship in life. Even people who love the Bible says he causes it to rain on the just and the unjust. But what happens is when our church tells us if you leave, you're going to be cursed, then we associate any challenges in life with the fact that we left. You would have got that flat tire anyway, but because they told you was going to be cursed, when you got the flat tire, you said, this because I left church.
How is the church trying to control the narrative where it comes to the mass exodus we are seeing from organized religion overall, but also from the church specifically?
Yeah, they're just trying to shape it as people want to take the easy way out. They don't want to be corrected. They don't want accountability. They just want to live in sin. That's how they're shaping it.
Does the
But
church want accountability?
of course not. That's not the point, though. I mean, that's not the point. Like, that's not how they see it in their minds, right? They see it as a divine calling. This is what God would have us to do. And when you spiritually bypass real life situations and make them about God, there's really no argument against it. Well, God told me, well, God told me, well, God told me. So I tell people, like, look, don't judge whether something comes from God simply based on what the person told you. Like, look at the fruit of that. Don't just look at well, it happened at church, so it must be God. What's the fruit of that thing? If my pastor said it, so it must be God. What's the fruit of that thing? When you apply what they said, what fruit did it bear in your life? Did you feel more at peace? Did you feel more connected to yourself and the world around you? Like, consider all of those things, because I believe that is divinity, right? I believe the inner peace that you feel is the presence of the divine, not just the acceptance of a community or a pastor that tells you they're the voice of God. But like, really, my mom always says, you know, you've been in the presence of God when you feel better about yourself when it's over.
I barely have words for what you just said because it sounds like you're telling people to come back to themselves.
Yeah.
Like you're telling them, like, hey, you need to check in with yourself. Check in with how do you feel before you go? How do you feel after you come back? Are you feeling good, safe, sane? Are you feeling in alignment? And when I tell people this, people look at me like especially the ones that are like very into whatever the religious practice is or indoctrination or however you want to call it. They're just like, but that's not the point. And I'm just like, isn't it?
Yeah. But religion
Isn't
tells you
it
it's
the
not.
point? Like when so like I
Religion
think
says the opposite.
exactly. Except God didn't say that, or at least the way that I experience God. I don't feel like God's place necessarily is to make you do or not do, or to be or not be, but to give you room. And if we're saying that God is like a parent, then a parent doesn't a good parent is not going to try and dictate your every move. They allow you to be you because you are a separate being from them, but then they're just there for you regardless of whatever the outcome of your choices are.
And people who have parents who allow them to be themselves usually have a better relationship with God. And the people who have helicopter parents who hover over everything that they do and nitpick every single thing that they do, it usually is also reflected in their relationship with God.
I'm gonna say something wild because it's something that you said. Sounds to me like they have a better relationship with themselves. They have better self-esteem, which means that the God is in you.
One of my favorite quotes is, you get the God that you believe in.
Good God.
You get whatever you believe about God will be true for you.
Sounds like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes is, God created humanity in God's image, and then humanity returned the favor and created God in humanity's image.
Which means that we are natural creators and foolish to boot.
Yeah, I mean, if we are created in the image of God, and God's self is a creator, we are creative beings. And then we were told to multiply. That was the command in the creation narrative, right? Be fruitful and multiply. And in church, we just always tie that to having kids. But it didn't say have kids. It said be fruitful and multiply. That even your creativity is a multiplication of who you are. That what
Woo!
you put out into the world is you're multiplying. But we overlook that because, just have babies. And when you consider culturally where we come from, this is the first generation where everybody's not running around trying to have babies immediately.
That part. So then, what is the Black church creating? And how are they playing into contemporary discussions about sexuality, gender, and relationships?
Right now, the church at large is not doing a great job with sexuality and relationships.
They want you to make babies. They require relationships and sexuality.
Yeah, they're just not doing a great job with it because the church's sexual ethic is rooted in shame. And you can't have a healthy relationship with yourself sexually if your belief about your sexuality is rooted in shame.
I want to pause there because whoever's watching this, I need you to have run it back. Just run it back. Return the clock by what, 10, 15 seconds. Hear it again. You cannot
Yeah,
healthy
yeah.
sexuality that is rooted in shame,
You
nor
can't.
can you have a good relationship with yourself, with your lover, with others, or your God if it is rooted in shame. It is an impossibility.
Yeah.
because shame is not guilt. And I think that sometimes people get it fucked up because I'm like, guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is I am wrong,
Mm-hmm.
as in there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know that, if you believe with your whole heart and all 10 of your toes that something is wrong with you, you can't have a good relationship with yourself, which means that you have to now hide in every relationship that you're in. And then sometimes we use sex to cover up the shame. But then we still feel shame about the sex we just had. So you can't win.
Yeah. Yeah, you feel shame about being sexual and then you feel guilt because you acted on your sexuality. So you get the shame and the guilt because you're absolutely right. They're different. And you get both of them with the way that it's set up.
Two for one.
Yeah, and so much of fundamentalist religion is rooted in sin consciousness. Everything revolves around the concept of sin. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. If you do this, you're abomination. If you do this, God is going to condemn. If you do this, don't do this, don't do that. And it's all about following rules. The problem is the church's concept of sin is rooted in shame. Like it's rooted in stigma, right? And that is the major shift that I try to help people make, is that you have to reorient your understanding of sin. I don't even use the term sin anymore unless I'm using it as a teaching device, because I believe it gets lost in translation because of how it can be so easily manipulated. Because sin in church is associated with stigma. We associate something with shame. That's what it means to stigmatize something. You associate it with shame, regardless of the impact that it actually has on people inherently. You stigmatize it by associating it with shame, and then it becomes a sin. I encourage people to reorient their understanding of sin and not associate it with shame, but associate it with harm.
Ooh. Say more. I want more.
So when you think of it in terms of harm, then you begin to discover you're ashamed of a whole lot of stuff that's not harmful. And then there are some things you do that cause harm and you don't feel the shame. It's a complete reorientation of your understanding of the world. So what is harmful about you being a sexual being?
I mean, I can think of no things that
Right.
is harmful about it. But that's,
Right.
I mean, aside from the psychological harm that people experience because they've already been given all the roots within sexual shame,
Exactly. That's the harm. The shame.
the shame is the harm. And it
Exactly.
mostly just harms them. It stops them from having the type of sex that they want, for asking for the type of sex that they want. It makes me think about like the hypocrisy of judgment. I recently watched someone that I love his stuff. I'm not even gonna say his name. I love his stuff, and he did his video talking about like judgment, but specifically around body count culture. And he's usually very funny, but this was not funny to me because it was. I don't even think he noted that he was shaming anyone in this conversation about like body count culture,
Mm-hmm.
and this idea of like, is it okay for someone to have slept with this many people?
I
Why
hate that
didn't you
question.
say a smaller number? You just had to jump straight to like 20 to 40 to 120, and like, what's wrong with you in that? Or like saying it like in a way that is intended to be comedic, but really just reifies body count culture as the right thing, and anyone who's fucking a lot of people as counter to the culture.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all rooted in shame. Like your freedom to be sexually engaged with people in a consensual, honest, mutual relationship. No harm is done there. Everybody enjoyed the experience. No one was coerced, right? What is the harm in that? And if there's no harm in that, why are we shaming people for it? But you know what? We shame people for just being sexual beings, and then we cover up sexual coercion.
That,
Ain't that the opposite of what we supposed to be doing?
come on with it, come on with it, because It makes absolutely no sense. We discourage people from even acknowledging the ways in which they are sexual beings in the first place, tell them to be ashamed of it, to cover it up, and particularly the female form as being almost like a source of shame, a source of temptation, and a source of all that is wrong within the realm of sexuality, while still wanting this person to also be the vessel for the fruit of someone's loins,
Mm-hmm.
while telling them that there's something wrong with them. And I'm just like, there's this hypocrisy in what is being said versus what is being done. Because we know, like, everybody knows that one person in the church who touches the girls, and you tell the girls to stay away from this person, but you don't tell this person to get the fuck out of the church.
Right.
Like, you can't be here because you ain't got no self-control. So then, with the orientation that you've given, with moving from shame to harm, has it helped people get it?
Oh yeah. It is what we base pretty much everything in our community on. So and kind of give you the backdrop for how I got to harm,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I didn't just pull that out of the sky,
Good,
right?
because I want it.
Yeah, yeah. So in my theological evolution, I got to a point where my embedded theology, the theology that was given to me as a child that I grew up with and embraced and internalized, it just didn't make sense to me anymore. So I was in seminary like, okay, either I got to make sense out of this or I'm gonna have to let it go.
Mm.
Cause that's how my brain works. My wife is convinced, and I don't argue with her, that I'm undiagnosed on the autism spectrum. So like my brain needs to make sense out of stuff. Like, this doesn't make sense. I need to make sense out of this. And as I was doing study, I came across the greatest commandment in the Bible. And it's really interesting because like this is not something that we talk about a whole lot in church, but we claim that we follow Jesus and we want to be Christ-like, but we don't really emphasize the thing that Jesus said was the greatest commandment of them all. So an
Because
attorney
I'm running through.
Right. The attorney asked Jesus, I think it was Matthew chapter 22. It's also in Luke, but Matthew 22, starting around verse 34, this attorney asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment in all of the law? And Jesus said, love God with your heart, soul, mind, and your strength. And then the second part is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And he says, everything in the law and everything in the prophets hinge on these two, right? So love for God and love for neighbor as self go together. Like, you can't separate them because everything hinges on both of them. Now, what fundamentalist Christians do is they try to separate love for God and love for neighbor as self, because they say, and not even fundamentalist Christians, like, this is something that even progressive people struggle with, like the connection between love for God and love for neighbor as self. They'll say, you got to love God first. You got to love God first. And I'm like, what does that even look like? Right? Because that shifts from context to context. But when Jesus said the second part is like it, the word like in English is a translation decision, because in the original language of the text, the Greek word that is used there means of equal rank. So love for God is of equal rank with love for neighbor as self. And I believe of equal rank is a better translation, because in the next verse, Jesus says everything hinges on these two together. You can't separate them. So Jesus says your love for God is expressed in how you love your neighbor, and your love for your neighbor is a reflection of how you love yourself. So
What if people
self-love,
are loving their neighbors as they love themselves, which is to say, not at all?
exactly. Exactly. So if you love yourself like shit and you love your neighbor like shit, that is a reflection of how you love God.
So I wrote a book, Drink Water, Mind Your Business. And one of the things that
Congratulations.
sort of, thank you, that started it is this video that I made on TikTok. And people were big mad at me. They were just like, you wrong. You don't know what the fuck you talk about. I was just like, self-love is not self-taught. It happens in community,
Yeah.
which means that if your community teaches you bullshit, you hold on to bullshit and you repeat it. You gift it. to others. And it becomes this cycle of self and other abuse. Like,
Yeah.
you can't love your way out of you can't just love your way out of bad habits with yourself. And what I feel like you're saying is that this is the same thing. You have to love God and your neighbor. It is one thing. It is really one commandment. It's two parts of one commandment.
Exactly.
Love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And the problem is that if your neighbors have failed to love you well, then you don't know how to love them, which means there's no way in hell you know how to love God.
Right. Right. And the crazy thing about the greatest commandment is that Jesus doesn't even command his followers to love themselves. He assumes it. There's no command to love yourself. It's assumed that you do. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself.
Because the assumption is then that
You
you love
love
yourself.
yourself. But are
And
we
yet we have
taught?
been given everything in this world to make sure that we don't.
So
Because
our
control,
religion
it's connected to capitalism.
has been teaching us the exact opposite of the greatest commandment. Because when you tell people that self-love is at the core of the gospel, they look at you like you insane. But it's
Yeah,
right there in our
because
face.
people will take it as being that you're arrogant. They will
Self-righteous,
take it that you're being
self-absorbed,
self-righteous,
self-absorbed. Yeah.
and that as a result that you've now placed yourself above God, as opposed to doing what you're supposed to, which is loving yourself, loving your God, and loving your neighbor, all one band, one sound.
Right.
Because it's given Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, but that's just to me. That's what it's giving to me. I'm not asking anybody else to pick up what I'm putting down. A question for you, like, what would it look like if religion itself was rooted in pleasure and desire?
I believe it would look like what we're doing at the faith community. I'm really proud of what we're doing at the faith community. We encourage pleasure. We encourage desire. We encourage people to be in touch with themselves. And I believe it will be much more holistic, much more fulfilling, and much more challenging because it requires greater levels of accountability.
You have to talk to me about this accountability. What would it like, especially like because it feels like counter to church culture as we know it. So, what does the the nomenclature already say about how desire, pleasure, and accountability are defined versus how you are defining them and moving forward?
Yeah, because I do it rooted in like harm, right? Like if the greatest commandment is to love, the first rule of love is do no harm. So anything that contradicts love is harm, and whatever contradicts love is sin. So harm is sin and sin is harm. So if nobody's being harmed, then nobody's sinning, right? So but that actually empowers the individual to make decisions for their self, because what fundamentalism does is it makes meaning out of everything for you. It packages everything for you. Follow these rules. Then you don't actually have to process what you're doing, how it's affecting you, and how it's affecting the people around you. All you got to do is follow the rules. But when you take ownership, when you embrace your agency and your autonomy, now you have a greater level of accountability to yourself. So we tell people like, we're here to empower you to live your own life, but with great power comes great responsibility.
Okay, Spider-Man.
So I'm saying, because so what happens is a lot of people will come into the faith community, our digital ministry, and come to me as their pastor, asking me to tell them what to do. And they get mad at me, like, just tell me what's the right way to do it. No.
That's like the way people come to therapy.
Exactly. Like no.
Like, you're not broken, and I don't have answers.
Yeah. Like I'll help you walk out what is best for you, but I'm not here to dictate to you what you need to do. Because you have to take responsibility for that. You have to be accountable for the decisions that you make. And you can't scapegoat that onto your religion or your God anymore. So freedom is costly.
This is why they don't like you.
Yeah.
I can see it, because if you were telling people you are the one that has to take responsibility, it undoes the entire system. And the
Yeah.
system cannot work on the backbone of the thing that you have created.
If we deal with it from the perspective of harm, everything would change, because we cover our predators in church. Like, that's why predators go to church. They find cover in church. So if we actually dealt with harm, then the creepy uncle that be filling on all the kids would actually get addressed in the black family, instead of telling the kids, oh, just stay away from him. No, get that out of the house, because he's harmful. But instead, you shame the kids
For dressing the way that they dress. It's always go put on some pants. You ain't wearing no brassiere.
We've been working in reverse.
It's all kinds of things, as opposed to let me go on ahead and get this person up out of here.
We've been working in reverse.